back to Let's Talk episode 34. Let's talk about escaping a religious cult. Today, I have with me Lindsay Tornambe. Lindsay, how are
Hello,
you doing?
I'm great. How are you? Thank you so much for having me on.
Yes, of course. I'm doing well. I'm in Iowa, so we're kind of snowed in right now. So this is the perfect time to record some things, catch up on some things, and learn more about you. And I thought I would kind of start us off with how we met. So it was, to me, a total God thing, honestly, because I went to Share the Arrows in Texas, Allie Beth Stuckey's event. And the night before, there was like a private dinner for VIP people, I guess, which I always hate saying those things because I feel like that makes it sound so like a private dinner for VIPs only. But you know what I'm trying to say. It was like you buy the ticket, you get the dinner. And it was at the Blaze Studios, and you and I happened to be sitting next to each other. And I don't really know how it got started, but I was trying to kind of plug myself by being like, I'm trying to start this podcast. My dad has a podcast. It can be difficult to start your own. And then you were like, well, I kind of have a story that I've been starting to share with people. And I'm like, okay, what is it? And then you started to share it. And I was like, okay, this is crazy. And not crazy bad, but crazy like how God kind of put us together in that circumstance. And so, why don't we start off by talking a little bit about why you were at Share the Arrows and maybe tell us too, like what stood out to you? Because I did a whole episode on it, but what stood out to you mostly at Share the Arrows?
Um, gosh, Allie Beth Stuckey, I first heard of her a few years ago. It was shortly after I started opening my heart back up to God, and we'll get into that whole story in a little bit here. But somebody gave me her book, um, You're Not Enough and That's Okay. And it was so timely because I had been trying all of the self help, I'm enough, the follow your heart, all those things, and just always had felt so unsatisfied. And so that was my first introduction to Allie Beth. And since then, I started listening to her podcast, read her other book, Toxic Empathy. And so I saw this event come up, and I just felt that it was one that I didn't want to miss. And I think I've never been at an event like that with so many fellow believers and people who are like minded. And um, sometimes, in the Christian world, I think it can feel so lonely sometimes, and there's so much noise out there from the world, from other people sharing what they think is right. And so I think what stood out to me, one of the things was just being so rooted and grounded in the scripture and what God's done for us with other women who feel the same way. And it was so impactful. I mean, goosebumps just like the whole time. I think that was just, and it sounds so small, but it was one of the big things for me is just knowing that, okay, there is a group of warriors out here who are willing to share the arrows and, spread the good news of what Christ has done for us. And yeah, so it was an amazing experience, and meeting you was so wonderful too, and your sister. It was
Yes.
like you
Yes,
said,
and,
a God,
and
truly a God thing.
I know, and I completely agree though. I think um, you know, uh, it's so true that you can feel so lonely, even in Christian spaces too, because like sometimes you start talking to somebody and either they're like, yeah, I'm a Christian, and then you're kind of talking to them a little bit more, and it's like, I feel like we're not reading the same thing. Or,
Right.
it's like, I don't know what version you are in, but, or
Yeah.
you're kind of, sometimes Christians have a hard way of coming off in a humble way. Does that kind of make sense? Where it's like
Oh my
sometimes
gosh.
Christians come
Mhm.
off in a way where it's like, oh, I'm better than you. I maybe know more than you. And that was such an amazing group of women of all stages where it's like some women who are like, I'm just getting back into my faith. Other women where they're like, oh, I've been a Christian for years. I'm going around the country. Or some women, and the amount of women who brought their babies too to like be there as mothers, it was incredible. I mean, to see the amount of women carrying their babies and all of the female booths that there were. Like, it was so funny that Every Life was there, and
Mhm.
they started doing like pads and tampons and all that stuff, so you just like as you would go out during breaks or things, and or to go to use the restroom, you just like see women passing along with like boxes of pads and boxes of tampons back and forth. But it's like one of those things where it's like it was such a surreal moment because sometimes you feel like you're on an island. It's like no, like we are all just women who love the Lord, and we are all just regular women here to serve the Lord, like, and we're sitting there in some places and it's like the Duggars are like 2 seats away from us. I mean, we had one of the Duggars at our own table, right? And it's like you're sitting there like, what is happening? But then you kind of have this moment where you're like, at the end of the day, we are all God's children. And so it's like it can be easy to kind of blow people up in a certain light. But to have that experience where it's like, okay, one of the Duggars is sitting at my table. I need to take a breath. But it's also like she is here as, a daughter of the king, also trying to be fed and also trying to worship. And the amount of worship breaks we had and prayer breaks and how rooted it was. No, it was absolutely incredible. It was definitely like the best event I think I've ever been to.
Oh, same here, hands down. And to go back to what you were saying as far as Christians can come in, coming off, I guess like egotistical and they're better
Mm-hmm.
than you, that was a huge turnoff for me. I went through a time period in my life where I just did not want to go to church. I did not want God in my life. And there were some people I'd meet here and there who were very devout and Christian, but the way that they would present it to me made me feel like I was such a terrible, terrible person
Yes.
that just pushed me away. And so, yeah, being there with everyone, it was just a humbling and joyful experience.
One of my biggest things that I always tell people is I wish that Christians shared their testimonies like 10,000 times more and
Mhm.
shared the honesty of their testimonies because it can be really, and it is amazing to focus on, that moment where God turns your life around and you're with him and everything's great. But people who aren't there yet or can't even see it. Like I remember being at a time in my life where I can't even see where I'm at now. Like that would not even, I can't add those two together. Like I think about myself 4 years ago, and 4 years ago, me is not thinking, I'm sitting in a home with my family, with my husband and my daughter, and I'm happy and I'm engaged and active in my church and with the Lord. Like that doesn't even compute. Like, and I tell a lot of Christians, I just had an X space the other night where this woman was asking me, how do I connect with these people? Like, how do I connect with teenagers? Tell them about yourself and tell them about the bad and hard parts of yourself because
Yeah.
that's what gets people connected because they're going to see you now and hear
Mhm.
about those things and go, I'm not even understanding how are you doing these things here and you're here now? And it's like the only answer is Jesus Christ. And that is some of the best way to describe that. And
Oh,
that's one of the
absolutely.
reasons why I wanted to have you on today was because I think it's important for young women to hear that life isn't a Hallmark movie. It's the time of year for Hallmark movies.
Mhm.
I understand that Hallmark, we've got some shade. I may or may not be a Hallmark consumers every now and then, all right? But that is sometimes how Christians like to paint coming to the Lord is like you maybe have one tiny little oopsie moment and then all of a sudden though it's like everything's great, everything's fine, and that's not how it is. And so once you kind of shared a little bit of your story with me at Share the Arrows, I was like, oh my gosh, I would love to have you on and talk a little bit more about that. So I'm going to kind of do something I don't usually do, which is kind of open the floor to you to, share and to talk about yourself. And then I will probably, interject or ask questions, or it may come down to a point where I'm just listening and you're like, does this person even host this podcast or is this my podcast at this point? But I don't want to interrupt. But yes, so if I do have a question, I will interject. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. Um, well, I grew up, I'm the oldest of five children, four girls and then finally a boy. Grew up having church in our home. My parents were involved in something called the Way International, which got started out in New Knoxville, Ohio, by this man called Dr. Victor Paul Wierwille. And so we read from the King James Bible. We believed in speaking in tongues and interpretation and prophecy. We also, there were like some biblical differences that did differ. We did not believe in the Trinity. So Dr. Wierwille had written a book called Jesus Christ is Not God. And so that's what I like for before I can even remember was, believe that Jesus Christ, God, and the Holy Spirit were all three separate beings, not one and the same. Um,
And that's because this Victor guy, that's how he kind of outlined it, was that,
Correct.
I mean, how did he justify that then based off of what we read in the Bible, or is that kind of the is that kind of the whole point of this?
Yeah, he did read or write a book on it. I think I maybe read it once, and then I was so young. I don't even
Yeah.
think I dove into what he was really teaching, which actually could be good to go back and see, like, why we were taught that.
Mm-hmm.
Now I know the truth about the Trinity, but yeah, it was just that they, were all separate, and so then gave way to almost Jesus Christ was just a man.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of really diminished God and Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit all being one. And you could start idolizing a man then, which is eventually what happened, with us. Um, but yeah, so had church in our home. My parents, I always would ask them if people ask, "What are we?" Like, what do we say? We're not Catholic. They're like, said just say we're non-denominational. We had a pretty normal childhood, I would say, visiting our grandparents, Christmas, birthdays. We did start getting homeschooled when I started fourth grade. Um, and I think it was when I turned 9. It was November of 1996. My parents met this man called Victor Bernard, and he had also been a part of Dr. Werewolf's ministry. And so he had said that God had told him to, like, he had audibly heard from God to go around and find people from Dr. Werwolf's ministry and kind of be their shepherd. Dr. Werwolf passed away in 1985 and things had kind of broken up from his ministry. So he was sent by God, so he said, to find survivors and be their new shepherd. So at the time, my parents were living in Pennsylvania. They had gotten really involved in Amway. Um, my mom and dad had like "Go Diamond" written on the bathroom mirrors and spray painted in our drawers, and boards of the houses we wanted and the cars. And
Mm.
I remember Victor coming, and after meeting with him, my parents did a complete 180. I remember them saying, "We're going back to the Word." Things really started to change for my parents. And being 9, I mean, you're old enough to kind of feel that shift. I remember meeting him for the first time when he came to our house, and when somebody just has that authority that they carry, that they walk with, he definitely had that. He was very charismatic, but I knew from an early age that he was one I didn't really want to make upset. He just had that authority to him. But as far as any red flags or anything like that, I didn't really pick up on anything. I was 9. Me and my sisters put on a dance for him and the people who he had traveled with. And then one of the ladies there was telling us about the camp that they all lived in Minnesota, how fun it was, all the kids there. They had tons of animals. It just sounded like a fun place to meet. So my parents started planning a trip for us to go visit, which we did. It was April of 1997 was our first trip out to Minnesota. And it was this small town. I remember my dad joking, "Oh, if you blink, you'll miss it." It was Finlayson, Minnesota. It was really small. And the camp was set in the middle of nowhere. You had to go down this long road, and then you'd hit the dirt road, and it was up there tucked into the woods. Beautiful. It really was. I mean, a beautiful place. Had a pond that went out into a huge lake, tons of trees and wildlife. It was beautiful. Um, yeah, so we made our first visit there April of 97. My parents, another adult from our fellowship, and then me and my sister went out there. And I thought it was so much fun. I mean, there were tons of kids to play with and tons of animals. And I did see, though, at some of the meals, whoever disagreed with Victor would get, um, we called it being reproved, being corrected. Um, I saw him spit in people's faces, throw chairs. Just whoever basically challenged him would get corrected in front of everyone. Some people were thrown out of the church. And my parents, though, especially my mother, soaked it in. I remember she was like furiously taking notes while we were there. And, we eventually left, went back home, and we made a few more visits over 1997 and 1998. And it it came down, I think it was like September of 98. Victor came to Pennsylvania to our house and basically drew a line in the sand that my family either had to move out there, or we could no longer be making trips back and forth. It was either move out there or not be connected with them anymore. And so my parents decided to move our entire family
Wow.
out to Minnesota. Yeah, which at the time, like I go back to that time and people have asked me, did you have any like red flags? Were there anything? And honestly, no, because one, I didn't know how it was going to end up. I was 11 at this point. I didn't know that I was basically never going to be able to come back and visit my grandparents again. Like none of that was talked about. I just knew that all of my friends lived up there because we were homeschooled and we weren't in extracurriculars. So pretty shut in as far as
Yeah.
having friends. All my friends were out there. We had been exchanging letters back and forth. This was pre phones and iPads, so snail
Well,
mail.
and you trust your parents enough, I'm
Yeah.
assuming, that it's like, okay, my mom and dad, I trust them. They haven't done me wrong yet so far,
Mhm.
to your knowledge, as you know.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, if they think this is a good idea for me, and it's like, what are you supposed to do at 11? It's
Yeah.
like you also have 11-year-olds have this vision. They're not
Mhm.
looking at everything around them, or, oh, maybe you're looking at this. So if you
Yeah.
trust your parents, you're going to trust their guidance. And so, yes, that makes sense.
Exactly. And on like another small note, I was a huge reader when I was younger, and Laura Ingalls Wilder loved the
Yeah.
books. And I'd always wanted to live like her. So I was like, oh my gosh, living on a farm, this kind of lines up with,
Well, and
you
if
know,
you're homeschooled, because I was homeschooled my whole life, it can feel like you are closed off a little bit from the world. And so it's like, oh, I have an opportunity to, not only be homeschooled, but I'm going to be around a bunch of people that I can be around all day and play with all
Mhm.
day. Like, this is great. This is fun. So yes, it totally makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So my parents packed up everything and we moved out there in November of 98. And I don't even remember it being like a huge deal as far as saying goodbye to my grandparents and my aunts and uncles. Maybe it was made to be that way because
They didn't want to scare you.
exactly, yeah. Because later I did find out, and now this was after I finally left the cult, that my mother had written a letter to her side of the family basically saying, don't try to stop us. If you like try to stop
Mm.
us, we will not have contact with you anymore. You won't hear from us. So I'm sure in her mind, she was like, we're not going to make this a big deal
Yeah.
because um, so yeah, we get out there and my family has moved into fourplex. So it's this building with basically four tiny units in it. Each had two bedrooms, sink, some cupboards, a mini fridge, and like a two-burner stove and a bathroom. So there's seven of us, so they split us up into two units. And at that point, I think there was about 80 people living on the
Oh my
one
gosh.
camp. Yeah, it was packed. And there were, at the time, I think there were two other locations within maybe like a 5 to 7 mile radius from where the camp was. That other, called them believers, lived at. So we were there, and I thought it was great. We had our animal care assignments, we did homeschool, and then we went out and played Indians and cowboys, cops and robbers, watched all the John Wayne movies, and I was having a blast. And then, but still, I mean, there were certain things, again, that you'd see Victor do that that scared me, that I was like, I never want to make him mad. Shortly after we got there, one of my sisters, my youngest sister, got in trouble. I don't even know what it was for. And it wasn't Victor, but it was one of the elders, picked her up so hard and shook her that she peed herself,
Oh my gosh.
which really scared me. And I remember comforting her and,
I mean,
um,
what does your dad do or your mother do in that situation? Like, are they so afraid of the pushback that they do nothing? Because, like, I think of a dad and like the important role that he is in a family unit, which is you are the protector, you are the leader, and it's like you're watching a person that you're supposed to be protecting and taking care of getting hurt so bad that they're peeing themselves. It's like this is a bad situation. I mean, what do they do when they see this kind of stuff go down?
nothing. Nothing. And I don't know if it's, now my parents did use corporal punishment on us growing up. My dad used to make these rods that he would hit our butts with, and like pepper on the tongue, or being, hit. But I mean, nothing that bad
Mm,
that that elder did. And I don't know if it was just because, you almost join this community and it's like everyone is parenting each other's kids in a
mm,
sense. And especially the elders, Victor, it was like they almost had this authority even over my parents. And so, but I agree with you. Sometimes or a lot of times I think back and I'm like, what were they thinking? It wasn't like they were raised in a situation like this. They had great, loving parents, both of them. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm like, we lived there for a month and a half and stuff like this is already happening to your kids
mhm.
and you don't do anything,
Yeah.
it could have been fear. Sometimes that is what I think, that maybe it was just like a spirit of fear that took over, and they were more afraid of getting kicked out than protecting their family,
Mm,
unfortunately. Yeah. Um, yeah, so things like that happened here and there. Our family was eventually moved to a new location about 5 miles away. It was called Three Taverns. And life kind of just went on. We started our own gardens, homeschooling, we had animals. And it was the summer of 1999. Victor called it the summer of love. Kind of, I think he got it from the Song of Solomon.
okay.
And he had this camper that he went around to the different locations to. And it was really a summer of the women starting to really fawn over Victor. And I should probably go back. Right before we moved there in 1998, Victor had taken off his wedding ring. And, in the church, it talks about how the bride of Christ is the church. And
Mm-hmm.
so he was basically married to the church now, which, again, going back to Jesus Christ not being, being just a man,
Mm.
this was almost Victor saying that I am now, in a
That
sense,
symbol,
Christ
that
in the
symbol.
flesh.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
marrying himself to the church. And he had a wife and 4 kids. He moved out of the house and moved into this. We called it the lodge. It was right next door to where his wife lived. But yeah, so he was basically saying he was giving his life to the church. So then the summer of 99 came, and it was really the start of just even the married women, the young women fawning over him. He would go out into we call it, pastures and graze the sheep. It was kind of where we would take him around and let him eat the different
Mm-hmm.
parts of the pasture. And he would lay a blanket down, and the women, I mean, even married women would be there, just laying next to him, hearing him talk, read scripture. It was, yeah. And he wouldn't do this with the men or the young men, it was just the women.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that summer that he, I think it was that summer. Oh, I should have looked at my memoirs. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was that summer. The summer of 99, he had a tent at Three Taverns, and there were a ton of girls that I was friends with, like at different locations, and a bunch of them came over, and we were all going to sleep in the tent with Victor. And
And you're 11.
I was now 12.
Okay. Doesn't make it better, but yes, I
Yeah,
now
I
I
was now
understand.
12.
Okay.
Yeah. And still like fully undeveloped. I was a very late bloomer,
Yes.
so looking like a kid. And one of the older girls, she was probably maybe 20, 21, asked who wanted to sleep next to him, and everyone raised their hand except me. I did not want to. I was really shy, and she picked me to sleep next to him. Yeah, because I didn't want to. And I remember laying there, I mean, just being terrified, like one, he was the man of God, he was somebody who represented Christ to me. And two, I mean, he at this point, I think was 39,
Oh
38 or
my gosh.
39. So I was just laying there stiff as a board, like not moving a muscle, afraid to
And it
breathe.
was like what was it? Was it supposed to be like a some form of, like a ritual? Did he go to a point like in scripture where he was like the man lays down with, like, what was the point of him asking a woman, or I mean you're not a woman at this point, a
No.
girl to lay
Yeah,
with him? And
yeah.
again, I feel like I feel like this is a question I'm gonna ask a lot. What is your parents' reaction to
No.
their 12-year-old laying with a 39-year-old man? So
Yeah.
what was the point of this, and what did your parents
Right.
say?
Yeah. So he was teaching a lot from the Song of Solomon and the Book of Ruth when Ruth asked Boaz to cover her. And
Okay.
so I think, I mean, that was just a lot of it, like who Victor represented to us. He was supposed to be our first love. Even that term was used, even that as a young age. He was supposed to be our first love, the person that we were basically serving and joining and attaching ourselves to in this life. And as the years went on, it was the more you dedicate yourself to Victor and serving in this life, the better place you're going to have in heaven. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, it was really asking him for that covering, in a way, and thinking of him as our first love and our shepherd, and respect. That was a year he was really asking for respect from the believers and just treating him differently. He wasn't just another man there; like he was the chosen one, the one that God had audibly talked to, who had ordained to be our apostle. Yeah. So, and then my parents, I don't know. I mean, it was even that summer that the girl who had asked who wanted to sleep next to him
Hmm.
asked my parents if me and my three girl siblings, my sisters, could sleep in the camper with him, and she would be there too, and they said yes.
Oh
Like
my gosh, man.
that is, it's just, I don't know. People have said all the time, oh, they weren't in their right mind, they were brainwashed. I have a hard time fully grasping that because I'm like, okay, we moved there in November of 98, and by the summer of 99, not even a full year, you were so far gone that no red flags are going off to think, oh my gosh, my 12-year-old should not be in. I mean, I have a 11-year-old daughter right now. I would die for her. Like,
Oh, of
I
course.
just literally
Of
could
course.
not imagine. Um,
Well, and
yeah,
that's what I was gonna say too. I can't even imagine trying to reconcile with that idea as not only a grown adult now, where it's like I can look back at this with an actual grown lens, but as a mother as well, especially when you say to an 11-year-old, it's like it's right around that age that these things were happening. And so I mean, power to you for your strength and ability to even like come out and speak about these types of things, especially when you are kind of, I mean, I'm sure in a way dealing with these types of things yourself too, because you're basically looking at that version of yourself, raising a version of yourself at that age where it's like that's kind of what you were going through. And so I mean, I can't even imagine.
yeah, yeah. It's brought up great conversation for my daughter, Frankie, and I, because she doesn't know all the details of what I went through. Like, it's too much for her right now. but enough to know that there were bad things that happened. And but we've talked about already sex and your body and
Mm-hmm.
like all those things,
Oh yeah.
because
Oh yeah.
I don't remember my mom talking to me about any of that stuff. And I don't know if it was the times, people back then didn't really talk about things like that, but still I feel like as a parent, you should they shouldn't have allowed that to happen. I really don't know. I wish I knew why they agreed to all of that.
Yeah, I feel like more and more you hear stories about parents allowing their children to do things, and it's not like that was a thing of the times either. I mean, for a practical sense, you hear about parents all the time letting their children go through like genital mutilation surgeries, for
Mm.
example. You hear
Right.
that, and even
Yes.
that, I can't even reconcile that in my brain. And I know that's kind of an off-topic thing, but I'm using that kind of as a draw to say like there are
Mm-hmm.
so many things that I didn't even need to be a parent to maybe even hear a story like yours so far, or hear even something like that and go like, what are we doing? And I think that the fact that obviously people have gotten a little bit of a glimpse on, the how the story ends. That, I mean, you're not at Share the Arrows, you weren't
Right.
protesting as far as I was concerned or saw. So it's one of those things where people have a little bit of a glimpse at the end. And so it's just incredible how God can take something as, I mean, the absolute failure of your parents and the adults in your life, and take that into you now, like sharing that story and having a close relationship with God, especially when there are so many people who take things like, you hear the term a lot, church hurt. You hear that a lot where people are like, I was hurt by the church. I can't, so I'm just done with God. And so your ability to grow from your circumstances and say, like that clearly was not God. Like God does not condone those types of things. And so it's incredible. But anyways, I won't, sorry, I went off on a little
You're fine.
trail
So
there,
much
but
I could comment on that, but I can wait till
yes, 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 yes,
later.
yes. So
All good stuff.
they were looking for, so they asked you and your other sisters to sleep in a trailer with Victor.
Yeah. Yep. And so,
And at this point, I want to clarify for the people listening,
mhm,
are we're talking about like just sleep.
just sleep.
Okay.
Yep. No sexual abuse had happened to me at that point.
Okay.
Like, no, even when I slept in the tent next to him, he didn't touch me or anything.
Okay.
I think he knew I was petrified out
Yes.
of my mind.
Okay. Okay. I just wanted to clarify that so we kind of
Yeah.
understood where, because sometimes those things can
Yep.
mean different things. So I just want to clarify.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and so it was his camper, his RV. So when you walk in, it's the couch there in the kitchen, and then you would make a right, go up some stairs, and then his bedroom is in the back. So
Okay.
him and the other girl were back there, and then me and my siblings slept in the kitchen area on the floor. But that was the first note I ever got from him. I guess it was to us. I kept it though, and he wrote "I love you" and slid it under the door. And I still have it. Which probably people listening are probably gonna be like, "What? Why does she still have things?" I am glad I kept some stuff. I think it's helped jog my memory, and also just for things I might be working on, a book down the road, or just things to have. Definitely helped with our case when we went to the police.
Well, and there has to be some psychological warfare in that too. You know what I'm saying? In
Mhm.
terms of, I mean, spiritual, of course, but
Yes.
also like I think I've talked about on this show before that I have a history with sexual assault.
Mhm.
And there have definitely been some moments where I've almost like gaslit myself into believing that that just didn't happen, or maybe like it was my fault, or maybe there was something where I was like, well, maybe I'm remembering wrong. And so like I'll go back, like
Mhm.
I used to have old text messages of me communicating with those people and kind of like breaking down the story of what actually happened. And so when I
Mhm.
would go back and read that, I would go, okay, you are not crazy. These are things
Mhm.
that actually occurred to you, where this person is admitting that. And so, yes, I totally understand why, in
Yeah.
a sense too, you're kind of, I can imagine fighting with yourself as well to say like, cause I mean, it's not every day that somebody is in this circumstance. This is
Mhm.
not
Yeah.
a common circumstance where everybody's like, "Oh yeah, me too," you know? It's one of those things where it's
Yeah.
like, "Did this happen? Is it?" I mean, did you have some of that too? Do you think that's part of the reason why you kept some of this stuff as well to say like, "Okay, this really happened. Like you're not by yourself. This isn't a crazy thing."
Oh, absolutely. I think that. I think also I really have nothing else from my childhood because I didn't mention this, but shortly after we moved to Three Taverns, Victor had us do something called the Burns. Everyone did it at all the
Oh,
different properties. And it was, I believe, oh, was it Paul? I think it maybe was an axe when they brought all their like things that maybe didn't glorify Christ, or
okay.
they had the burns. I think we'll have to fact check that, but it's somewhere in the New Testament. I think it was with Paul. Um, but yeah, so basically anything from your earthly life got burned. I mean, this fire burned for days. I feel like it got as tall as the barn. It was huge. People were putting couches, clothes. Somebody like
Wow.
put a motorcycle. I don't think they threw it into the fire because, you know, it'd be an explosion, but so many things. Um, so I think it's like all I have left
Mm,
from my childhood. So I think maybe some of that is it too. Um, Also, you know, Stockholm syndrome is real. And I like
mm,
talking about all these things because sometimes I feel like people will be like, once you give your life to Christ, all your problems are going to go away. You know, it's great you become a Christian. When no, there is still so much that I have to process and deal with and go through, and it's okay. You know, like now I know and believe that the Lord is with me through
mm.
every second of it, but I still have to walk through those valleys. And so I before the Turning River Road came out, that podcast, I wanted to make a little collage of pictures to make a post, and put a splattering of Victor's notes, just some of them that he had given me. And I started crying. And
Mm.
I talked about it in therapy, and I remember thinking in that moment when I was having the tears, did he ever truly love me? You know, was any of it
Mm.
not, and I'm not talking sexually when we were intimate, um, it was maybe when he saw something that I was doing well spiritually and he wanted to give me something like a verse to research, or, you know, if I had worked on a song on the guitar and he was praising me for it because it turned out really well. Like,
Mm.
was any of it genuine? Was any of it real? And I don't know. I mean, we're still breaking all that down. I know, I mean, it it was all masked with his narcissistic evilness, you know? So,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I think maybe keeping them for that long, that was maybe some of it as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, and this is the thing too, is it's like obviously there's more to the story that I don't know, but it's also like when you have a lack of a paternal figure as well, that's supposed to be protecting you from these things, it's supposed to be guiding you, and then you have, and this is why a lot of girls, you know, that have daddy issues date pretty bad guys, is because these guys, it's almost like these guys sometimes have a way of kind of finding the girl that has the daddy issues and going, okay, it's going to be, I choose you.
Right.
And they find them and they basically kind of go in there and they're like, I'm going to be that person for you. I'm going to protect you. I mean, and then you kind of slowly get that broken down with the narcissism and the overbearing and controlling. But in your circumstance, it's, oh, this is supposed to be basically, you know, a god to me, which is, I mean, deserves a much more higher respect than any kind of boyfriend would ever get. And then,
Right.
I mean, that creates a whole different parallel as well that a lot of girls don't understand. But yes, so you guys were in the
Mhm.
trailer and Victor slid under the door a note, I love you. So no context, just, and
Yeah.
it was for you.
For us. Yep. For us. I ended up keeping it, taped it. He eventually gave me we used the King James Version of the Bible. So I had a companion Bible he ended up giving me, and I had it taped in there. Um, but yeah, I honestly did not have feelings of really love towards him. I knew that I respected him. I knew that I should honor him, that I should love him, but it took years for me to really fall in line to that, to where I felt one with him, where I wanted to protect him, to
Mm-hmm.
serve him. Yeah, it took me a really long time to get there. But yeah, so that was 99. I think it was January or February of 2000. So I was either just turning 13, like about to, or had just turned 13. And his camper again was parked at Three Taverns, and I think I was asked to bring him his mail or letters or something. And I walked into his camper, and this was the first time this had ever happened. He was standing in the back completely naked. And I just froze again. I had no idea what to do. I had never seen a man naked before, like,
Mm-hmm.
um, and he asked me to come back, and I did. And I remember he like put his arms around me and he guided my hand down to touch his penis. And still, like, in my body, I can feel how tense I was, like I can feel things tightening just because of how, oh, yeah, I just was really scared. I didn't know what to do. The only thing I kept thinking of was I didn't want to be there, but I also didn't want to make him mad, because I had seen what had happened. So, um, I, he had me lay down on the bed, and I was still fully dressed, and he told me I could do more, and I didn't. I didn't move. I didn't say anything to him.
Yeah.
And then I think he got the hint at that point, and, he told me not to tell anyone, that this, needed to stay between us. It was, just a way for him to show me God's love and just to not tell anyone about it, that it was like I was special. And I didn't. I think I just buried it in the back of my mind. I didn't say anything to anyone. I remember going home that day, there was snow everywhere, and um, just feeling like shame in a way, shame and guilt, even though I hadn't wanted this or done anything, but I felt like I was the dirty one. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if that makes sense, but
Mm-hmm.
I did talk to my parents about it, and that was it. That was the last time he tried anything with me, for a while there, for almost a year.
Wow.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think the part that like is so awful for me is obviously, you know, the the sexual aspect of that and taking advantage of the fact that he is in a position where he has put himself in a place where he has authority. He feels like he has the authority to do so
Hmm.
without pushback. But also the part that just, it angers me is when people use God to justify awful behavior. And we see that a lot in tiny ways, and that's why a lot of people, like we were talking about, have church hurt, is because you see a lot of people, leave churches where something bad happened and nobody took responsibility and the pastor did nothing, and it's like, well, that's not what God would do. But to see and hear about somebody taking advantage of somebody in the name of God is just absolutely disgustingly evil.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's sad because I truly loved God. Like, I had such a heart for him, gosh, since I can remember, I mean, sang all the songs. This little light of mine, I want to tell the story. Um, Peace like a river, like all the old hymns, and would talk to him all the time and pray. And my mom even would share stories when I would be out as a little kid and another kid would be scared to walk into school, and how I would like pray for them or take their hand. And um, I remember my dad teaching me to tithe when I was really little. We were sitting at this, I think I had a Princess Pink vanity set. I was maybe 5 years old. and we had this money on the table, and he was teaching me about tithing, and what that means, giving back to the Lord. And he had to go take a phone call, and I remember lifting the money up in the air saying, "Oh God, I want to give it to you, like here it is." And he didn't reach down and take it, and my dad came back and started laughing and just explaining it more what that looked like.
Yes.
But I did. I mean, I really loved him, and I have journals through all those years, 2005, 2006, 2007,
Wow.
and I read them now, and I am just talking to God in them, right? Like asking him to take care of me, asking him to keep my heart pure, to thanking him for providing us with bread, giving us shampoo because we didn't know where it was going to come from. And I just look back and I'm like, it's just amazing. I mean, that Victor, he did try. He was so narcissistic and manipulative, and evil just ran through him. But even through all of that, I was still talking to God and praying to him, and oh, you know,
Wow.
but
I mean, I'm sure you get this a lot, but I am like so incredibly sorry that happened. I mean, I cannot even come close to imagining what that's like to not only go through but work through as well, because a lot of people are like, wow, that happened so long ago, that's in your past. I'm so proud of you for getting through it, but like anybody who's ever been through, not even like just any kind of past trauma, knows that it's not something you just kind of get past one day or you just get through. It's something that you are constantly choosing to trust God through, work through, talk in therapy through, talk yourself through, allowing other people in, allowing light into that part of your story to kind of shine out the darkness. And so, first off, I commend you for that. And secondly, I am incredibly sorry.
thank you. Yeah, you're so right. And I've had so many people say that to me. Oh, well, you need to forgive and forget. You
Hmm.
need to move on. Like, what are you going to do? Use it as a crutch your whole life? Like, literally, that said. And I'm like, use it as a crutch? Are you kidding me? I mean, even today, or even every day, waking up, it is a choice, to stay strong, to put one foot in front of the other, to not succumb to the sadness, because there is a lot of sadness, hurt, abandonment
Yeah.
in my story, but just remember, every day choosing to trust in the one who held me through it all, because he did, even though I didn't realize it at times. But it's every day, just working through it, not succumbing to the grief.
So I want to dive back into your story, if that's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Because obviously I'd never be like, you have to talk about this if you were like, and we're done. Like if you were like, that's where we're gonna cut, I'd be like, and that's where we're gonna cut. That's it.
no, no.
So I want you to know that too. But so I don't even want to ask, but because not because of you, because of what I fear is the answer. I don't want to ask. But you had mentioned that so Victor tried that with
Mhm,
you,
mhm,
and you said that was the last time he tried that for a while.
mhm. Yeah,
So
yeah.
where do
So
we go from there? Because I liked the that was the last time you tried that with a period. I didn't
period.
like the for a while part.
I
I
know.
would love if that ended with a period. I didn't like the for a
Yeah,
while part. So why don't you talk a little bit more about that?
sure. It was late spring, early summer of 2000, and Victor did a teaching at the chapel. So on the main camp had the chapel, like the huge dining hall, so all the church could gather there for like an area fellowship. And generally that happened once a month. So at one of those, he was talking about how in the Old Testament the firstborn children were a sacrifice to the Lord, and how he thought it would be good if there was basically a spiritual sacrifice and young women dedicating their lives to serving in the church. And he read off a list of names, and mine was one of them. There were 10 of us, 10 girls. And so I was given the option to move to the camp. And I started hearing, I was living at Three Taverns. You start hearing whispers of what's going on at other locations, and I hear of my friends moving there. The girls that I had known since 1997. And I was like, I want to do that. I want to go live with them. And this was something we joked about years later, and it's even written in my memoirs. I did not realize this was a lifetime commitment. I thought this was for the summer because during the summer you could go serve at the camp, and then at the end, Victor had to celebrate something called the Feast of Tabernacles, which happened in the Old Testament. It was one of the Jewish feasts where, at the end of the harvest, you gather everyone in, and it was basically a celebration and a thanksgiving in a way of what God had provided and given to you that year. So all the believers would come in and camp in tents, and there would be food, and generally we had fattened up like 2 ram lambs to slaughter, and lots of music and teachings. So I was like, this will be great. I'll go and serve there in the summer, and then obviously I'm coming home to get homeschooled in the fall.
And you were 13,
So
14.
I was 13.
Okay.
13. And um, I told my parents I wanted to go, and I remember them being way more serious than I was, and my dad crying, and I was like, I don't understand why you're crying, like I'm going to be back. And it was July 23rd, 2000, that we all loaded up, my parents and all my siblings, and they drove me to the camp. And we get down to the dining hall, and one of the other girls is there, and she takes me down to the fourplex, kind of like full circle moment in a way, because that's where my family was put, and then that's where I'm living now without them. And one of the ladies who, if you listen to the Churning or River Road, for anyone who's listened, she was referenced as Jan. Jan met my parents and took them up to the lodge to meet with Victor. And I don't know what that meeting entailed, but yeah, I was taken to the fourplex, and it was kind of great at first. They did plan out our schedules, and I was living with some of my best friends. Jess, she comes up in the Turning a lot. She was 12 and I was 13, and we, gosh, were like yin and yang, just really, really good friends. And so, yeah, we were, I guess, coined the word the maidens. That's what they named us, the 10 maidens. And we were doing all the things, cooking. There were about 40 people who lived at the camp then. So we were assigned in twos and given different assignments, cleaning, gardening, all the things. 2 of us were assigned to Victor, which I wasn't for a while, and that was probably on purpose. I eventually, when I was, I hated that job, but yeah, it wasn't until I think it was late August of 2000. I remember I was weeding in front of the chapel next to Jan and telling her that this has been great, but I'm really excited to go home after the Feast of Tabernacles and how much I missed my family. And she looked at me and she goes, Lindsay, you're not going home. And I looked at her and I was like, what do you mean I'm not going home? And she's like, no, this is a lifetime commitment. And I said, well, I don't have any of my winter stuff, and I need to, what about schooling? And she's like, well, your parents will drop off all your winter stuff, and we'll take care of schooling here. And this is your home now. And that was the first time it really sunk in. And I remember thinking, what? Like, what did I sign up for? Because I don't remember signing my life away to this. And it was very shortly after that Victor called me to the lodge one night, and we were sitting there, and you walk into the lodge, and it's a little kitchen, and then you go to the left, and there was a leather, like an orangish kind of brown leather couch, and then his chair and a fireplace. And he's sitting in the chair, and I'm on the couch, and the fire's going. And it's small talk at first, and out of the blue, he then asks me if I had ever masturbated before.
Oh my
And
God.
I had never even, I didn't know what that word meant. My mom had never talked about that with me. I, honest to God, didn't know what he was talking about. And I kept saying, I don't know what you mean. I don't know what you're talking about. And I don't know why he thought I was lying to him. And he got so mad, he hit me across the face and screamed at me to get out of the lodge. And I remember getting up, and I had been sweating so much that my skin had been sticking to the leather, and it felt like I was ripping band-aids off of my skin. And I ran out into it was nighttime, completely dark, ran back to the fourplex, and that was the first time I remember just sobbing and wanting to go home and missing my parents. And I kept thinking, like, why, God, why did you leave me here? You know, it was my first time of really questioning him on why something was happening to me. And I got back to my room and just cried into my pillow. And it was maybe half an hour, 45 minutes later, one of the maidens came and said Victor was on the phone for me. We had these phones set up at the camp to where you could ring to people's houses. And
Mm-hmm.
um, so funny, the only phone that the maidens could really use that would go to the outside world, though, was in the dining hall where everyone could hear you. So, but he asked me to come back to the lodge, and so I went back up there, and his whole demeanor had changed. He was so tender, so loving. He didn't bring up what had just happened. He had me sit on the couch again, and I still remember, you know, looking into the fire and just seeing the flames dancing and the embers burning, and him talking, telling me how basically, you know, in the Bible, Jesus Christ had Mary Magdalene, the Apostle Paul had Phoebe, he probably had other women as he traveled throughout Asia, and how with Victor's calling, it would be natural and normal for him to take care of me sexually. And that even though he would have sex with me, I still could remain a virgin spiritually. And this would be a way for him to show me how much God loves me. And um, he guided me back to his bedroom. And I remember he took out a towel to lay on the bed because he said sometimes when you have sex for the first time for the woman, you can bleed, which, as you can imagine, just made me even more scared.
Yeah,
And
I mean, you don't know anything about this, so you're hearing like blood and
nothing.
things. You're like, what in the world is going on?
Yeah, nothing. And I remember laying there, and it was almost an out of body experience. He had a deck with these sliding glass doors attached to his bedroom, and it was almost like I was standing out there looking
Mm.
into what was happening. And I did not move a muscle. I was basically just stiff, just laying there, a deer in headlights. And he got really mad at me at one point because I wasn't being passionate enough. And I still just laid there. I had no idea what to do.
Mm.
Um, and that, honestly, that was pretty much it. There was no really much talk after. He told me I could go home and just reiterated that you know, how special I was and that how much God loved me. And yeah, that was the first time he raped me. And again, I just sobbed all the way home, questioning, like, why aren't my parents here to help me? And why can't I go home? And why is this happening? Yeah, it was, oh, that night. It's, you know, there are some things in your life that you'll just never forget. That's
Mm-hmm.
absolutely one of them that just stay with you forever. Yeah.
I mean, but this is considered like a high honor to be a maiden. Is that kind of the gist of it? Like other people were like, wow, this is an honor for you. So you can't
Oh my
really,
gosh.
there's
Yeah.
not really a space for you to be like, hey, here's what's happening to me because people are, I mean, it sounds like people are so far in at this point that they're going to hear that he had sex with you and say, oh, but that's an honor. Like, is that kind of what the vibe was?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've heard from people. who have left who were children then who have said, oh, the maidens were put on this huge pedestal. What the
Mm,
maidens were wearing, because we eventually started sewing our own clothes, so we had fabric rooms, and the maidens had this dress in this fabric. That's what we wanted. You know, everything was, we were
mm.
idolized, which when I heard that, it was that in and of itself was hard for me to hear because I was like screaming on the inside to get out, you know? And then you hear that these kids at the time were like wanting to be me, you know?
Yeah.
It's just yeah. But oh, it was it was after that that probably happened in September and I think it was December or January that Victor had all of the maidens write a letter to him to say if we wanted to stay or not. And I, you know, it was one of those things after I got out, you look back on it and you think, why didn't I leave? You know, I think being 13 and my parents left me there. I didn't even know if they wanted me. You know, they didn't
Mm.
come check on me. I don't even know when the last time I'd seen them was. Um, you have a feeling all your friends are going to say yes. It's almost this like pressure you feel to
Well, and
say yes.
subconsciously, a part of you has to know that if you say no, he's gonna be not happy. I mean,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? It's like
Yeah.
when you hear people tell women, "Hey, if you were ever to be kidnapped, play nice to the person that you are with. Play nice to the guy that kidnaps you." Because you
Right.
might be able to play to those emotional heartstrings. It's kind of the same metaphor in a way because it's like you don't exactly you don't want to be the one girl to be like, actually I do want to go home, and then all of a sudden everybody's like, well, why don't you want to be here, and what is this about? And quick question too, like
Yeah.
were the other maidens, like were they also raped by Victor as well, or was that something where he had, because you hear sometimes too that some of these guys have weird attachments, like one girl in this thing, like was that thing, or do you even know?
No, yeah, he was. He was.
Okay.
He would and sometimes more than one of us in a day, you know? I mean, he would
Mhm.
call somebody to the lodge. Generally, whoever the two who were assigned to him would say, oh, Victor would like you to go up to the lodge. And you just, after a while, you kind of knew what was going on, you know? Or
Yeah.
if we were all hanging out with him, he would ask one of us to stay later in the night while the rest of us left.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so I think it was never talked about except one time, Jess and I, and this was, you know, we had all written our letters to him. We wanted to stay. And so he told us he wanted to do a ceremony in front of our parents, in front of the elders. And so he wanted to meet with our parents first, though. And I, I think this was like still again like end January of 2001, and January of 2001.
Okay.
So I had just turned 14, and Victor met with my parents and myself and one of the elders who was his right hand man in the lodge.
And was this the first time you had seen your parents?
I think maybe besides like a Feast of Tabernacles and an area
Okay.
fellowship, but Victor knew I loved my family. And grew up in Italian, you know, Irish, big families, everyone getting together. So I like family was very important to me, and Victor knew that. So I was really never allowed if they were came
Mm.
in for a meal to sit with them. You know, it was very isolating.
Mm.
So I don't even think I had had a one-on-one conversation with them where it was just us from at that point.
Wow.
And so he kind of started going through the same things, how, you know, Jesus Christ had Mary Magdalene, Paul had Phoebe. And then he used the example, he's like, Carmen, if you were in my position, if God had called you to ministry and you were traveling around, and Peggy had decided to dedicate her life to serving, it would be normal for you to take care of her sexually. Which completely, I was like, that's my parents, you know, like
Yeah.
so embarrassed. Um, but the kicker is, he said he wouldn't do it until I turned 18. He said he was going to wait, which again, you're telling my
Mm.
parents and I'm 14 that he's gonna wait. Like, why are you having this conversation now? It
Yeah.
just doesn't make sense,
Well,
you
I mean, and
know?
it's a lie. He had been
Right.
doing that.
Raping
I
me
mean, he is
already.
lying to you. Yeah.
Oh, so they had me leave at one point. I don't know what was discussed. And then I came back and we all left the lodge. And Victor was walking with my dad and my mom. And I were walking together and she kind of grabbed my arm and she was excited. She was giddy. And, um, in my mind, again, even though I'm hurting and not wanting to be there, I'm like, okay, well, they want me here.
Mm.
What can I say? It's just this feeling of feeling trapped, Um, And I think it was that day or the next day, Jess and I were in one of the bedrooms at the fourplex, and we kind of looked at each other. And I said, "Did Victor have a meeting with your parents?" And she said, "Yeah." And she asked me the same thing, and I said, "Yes." And we instantly knew, okay, this is happening now to both of us.
Mm.
And one of the older maidens heard us talking and reported it, and Jess and I were separated. We weren't allowed to share a room together. We weren't allowed to be on the same like work duty. It was for a little while that way that they separated the two of us because we had been found talking about what Victor was doing.
Oh my gosh. Probably
Yeah.
because they were like, they're starting to figure things out. We've got
Right.
to separate them so that this doesn't
Yeah.
become a problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So then it was February of 2001 that Victor held a ceremony in the dining hall with all our parents there, with the elders, and he had the maidens. We all lined up, and again still have the things. He had us wear veils over our heads. He had us take salt with him, which my parents took salt when they were married. I think salt is, pure, so I think it maybe signified like the purity and sanctity of marriage.
Mm.
Maybe I don't know all the reasons, but he did have us take salt with him. And then he put rings on our
I
ring
mean, so it
finger.
was a marriage ceremony,
Yeah,
essentially.
yes. And
Okay.
then his teaching was titled More Than Concubines, which he was talking about the maidens, how we're more than concubines. And this is, again, to our parents, to the
And
elders
circling
there.
back, so
Mm-hmm.
you had mentioned earlier too, he had a wife and 4 children.
Yeah, four
Were they
sons.
still in the picture? Like were like is this lady just sitting there like, you go,
Yes,
honey, marry your people? I mean, really, she was there.
she was there. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, some of us were, early on, we were assigned to different, like, elder women at the camp.
Mhm.
And she was one of them. Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so his teaching was on more than concubines. And I remember after the ceremony, like, we were allowed, like, I went over to see my parents because I think they were, like, waving at me. And I, again, felt so shameful. I felt so much guilt and shame.
Mm.
I don't even think I knew how to converse with them anymore. It was almost like seeing strangers.
Mm.
I didn't.
Well, I mean, and these people betrayed you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I didn't. Victor had started something called Dove's Eyes, which again comes from the Song of Solomon, having her having. I think it's called Dove's Eyes right in there. I actually, we're being honest here. I haven't read the Song of Solomon
Mm.
yet. More maybe more
Yeah.
therapy for that one.
Yeah. Which,
Um,
I mean, yes, that is a completely I think God will understand. Yes. I don't want
yeah.
to speak for him, but I think that that is totally valid. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. But so anyway, we weren't allowed to look any other men in the eyes besides Victor. So, if I'm talking to you and I'm looking you in the eyes and you're a man, I had to be looking like this and talking to you. So I don't even think I looked at my dad
Wow.
in the eyes. I just didn't know how to be around them anymore, which is really sad. Um, but yeah, so all that happened, and I mean, there's so many stories and things of what I mean, do you want me to give you like some things that happened or
I
kind of
mean,
move along?
let's I'm just like it's one of those things where I'm just so shocked in the amount of adults and people around you that just completely and totally just failed you as a child. You know, it's like when you hear about a child being physically abused and you hear about like, oh, they went to school and people saw bruises, or they went here, and you like hear about things like that and you're like, okay, so you saw this at all, you saw this at all, you saw this at all, nothing helped, nothing helped. It's like kind of like that where you hear that and you're like, there's so many people around
Mm-hmm.
that are living in these areas not helping you, that it breaks my heart. And well, I want to say that, so at this point you're basically married to him.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty
So
much.
let's fast forward a little bit if we can
Yeah.
to, I, I mean, are
I
you
did
just
try to leave at one point, and I
okay?
can
So
tell about that.
sure, that'd be great.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. It was, let's see. Do you mind if I grab? I want to get the date
No,
accurate. Okay.
no.
I just want to make sure I'm telling this. This is something, again, I'm glad I kept this. Um, can you read that? Does it come
Yes.
here backwards to you?
Yes, it
Okay.
says a song of triumph in Christ. Memories from the life of Lindsay. Yes.
Yep. So in 2008, Victor had us write our memoirs. Um, and I wrote, oh my gosh, how many pages? 40, 48 pages of memories. So I just want to make sure I have the year right for this.
Well, and while you're looking for that,
Yeah.
can you tell me, so what ages were you involved? Like from the age of, I think you said, what was it, 10 or 11? To
Mhm.
what age did you finally exit?
Yeah, so we met when I was 9 and I finally left at 23.
Wow. Okay. And how old are you now? Can I ask?
38.
I
Well,
know, I know you're not supposed to ask a woman her age, but I feel like it's fine if you're also a woman.
29 forever. No,
Yes.
38.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Hmm.
That is
Yeah.
a long time to be involved in that.
Yes.
That's
I
not
love
like, oh, I was a
that.
kid and it happened for a few minutes. I mean, even that's bad. But I mean, because you were
Mhm.
talking about 2001, like that was the year I was born, was
Oh my
2001. I was
gosh.
born in 2001. So you're talking about like this happening, and then I'm
Wow.
like also reflecting it back on myself, and I'm just like, this is a crazy timeline. But anyways, yes, you were looking for
Yeah.
your date.
So crazy. And also, just so everyone knows, we didn't have TVs or radio. So,
Mm.
like, I didn't know the thing that was popular when I was young was the Backstreet Boys. I was doing dances to their songs. And when I came back in 2010, June of 2010, that's what one of the first things when I learned what the internet was, looked up was what are the
Wow.
Backstreet Boys up to? Like
I love
I had missed so much pop culture. Not that we all need to be knowledgeable on what celebrity is doing what, but there are major events that happen in the world, presidency, wars,
hmm
like things that go on that it's good to educate yourself on and know what's happening. So I had no clue
Yes.
what was going
Well,
on.
and us homeschoolers can be very removed from the world as it is anyways. And so,
Yeah.
yes, it's one of those things where I mean, when you're physically removed from the world like that, yeah, it's
Hmm.
like you're obviously going to go back and be like, "So, what in
Yeah.
the heck happened here?" Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And so how old were you then when you tried to
Yeah.
escape? And what does escaping look like?
Okay. So it was 2002, the summer of 2002. I'm gonna just double check on this. Yeah, summer of 2002. And I will start this off by saying if Victor didn't think you were doing well spiritually, he would treat you like you weren't even worthy of being alive. He
Mm,
could put on the charm one minute and literally make you feel like the most important, special person in the world, and then make you feel like you should die and God doesn't love you
mm,
anymore. You're not worthy of his love. And he did that a lot. I mean, the back and forth, the mind games with not just me, but the maidens as a group
I was gonna say you have 10
all the
women that you're
time.
basically pitting against each other in a sense as
Yes.
well. Oh, I'm gonna choose. You all thought I was gonna choose this person to stay the night. Psych, I'm choosing. Now it's like that one woman who thought it was gonna be her is now in here thinking, well, what did I do? It's like a
Oh my
whole
gosh.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're mixing ages. I think the oldest maiden was 23 3 and then Jess was 12. You know, that's a huge age difference
Mm-hmm.
between us. And I would say it wasn't until the later years, maybe 2005, 2006, really, that we became like a sisterhood. You know, I mean,
Mm.
there was a lot of jealousy and learning to work together.
I
And,
mean, you guys were
so,
essentially sister wives.
yes. Oh, wait, say that again.
I feel it sounds to me like you guys were essentially sister wives.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, in a sense. I've never seen the show, but I've
Yes. Yes.
other than
I hate to admit that I have seen this show. I know that people are going to absolutely flame me for it. I have seen the show, but I mean, essentially, yeah, it's a bunch of women with
yeah.
one man, and
Hmm.
it's obviously not as, seditious, but it's one of those things where they're all learning to work together. They're all learning how do we live under one roof together. We're all pleasing the same guy. We're all sleeping with him, and we all have this dynamic. And I mean, at this point, I mean, are there children? Like, are people having as kids at this point?
Not really. I think there were only
Okay.
a couple children born during this whole time.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and Victor eventually got a vasectomy. I tried when I was 14 to get pregnant because I thought that maybe that was my only way out. And
Mm.
he, he had us, I don't even know what, I've never even looked him up since then, but it's like a sperm killer that women take. It looked like a tampon almost that you
Yeah.
put in your vagina. It's like this jelly, you know, that you like
Yes.
stir up there.
Yes.
Okay, so again, I don't even know how these things work. I don't even think I knew that it killed sperm. Like I just knew that I was supposed to use it. I was like, maybe if I partially put it in, you know, like, and don't shove it all the way up there, I'll get pregnant. And then they'll have to take me to the hospital, you know, and
Mm.
somebody can help me there. But
So what
he
finally
won't.
clicked for you then that you were done? Like
Um,
you were like, I have to get out of here.
yeah, at the end when I finally left,
Well, you talked about trying to escape, and then you talked
yeah,
about trying to get pregnant on purpose so that they would have to take you to the hospital. Like, what kind of shifted from, okay, well, this is my life, this is where I'm at, to I hope I get pregnant so I can, get out of here. I hope that I can escape. Like, what kind of happened in between the
yeah.
final leave and then the kind of subconscious attempts?
I missed my family. That was a big thing. I
Mm,
missed my family. I felt like I was getting reproved all the time. And I mean, I talked to other people who, like kids who lived there at the time, who were some of the young men, and they were like, "Yeah, Lindsay, you were just yelled at all the time, like always
mm,
getting in trouble." Um, I did push back a lot, so I that's probably why I got in trouble. But I knew I wanted a different life. I wanted to go to school. I used to love school. I would read history books for fun. I had thought I wanted to go to college. I would like daydream about this stuff of just
mm,
leaving and getting out of this. And I wouldn't have used the word rape though. I don't even think I knew that word was never in
mm.
my vocabulary at that point. So I didn't, even though I knew I hated what was being done, I didn't understand that Victor was raping me. Um, yeah, which maybe seems hard to believe, but I don't think I'd ever really heard that word before. And leaving, we left when I was 11, Pennsylvania. So I don't know, just being really sheltered, I didn't know what that looked like or what it was.
So
So,
you're in your 20s.
mm,
I mean, so I'm
well,
assuming
that was
over
at
the
that point when I wanted to leave. When later on when I left, there were more reasons, but
okay.
this was like when I was still really young.
Yes.
Hmm.
So when you were in your 20s, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot we could discuss, but over the years, I'm assuming that the rape continued.
Hmm.
Did you get to see your family? Were you still separated from them? Were they even still like here and a part of this? I mean, that's a part of it too, where it's like at this point you have such little contact with them that they leave, like then you realize it, like kind of. So what were kind of the overall factors into you being in your 20s and being like, okay, it's time to go?
Yeah, my parents were still involved. Um, Victor would send us home sometimes if he thought we weren't doing well. So that was like another thing. We were only sent home really if we were being punished. And so whenever that happened, like my mom was not happy, and that's when I did try to leave. It was 2002 that I told him I didn't want to be a maiden anymore, and he took away everything that he had given me as a maiden and sent me home. And my mom was crying. My dad didn't really talk to me, and so again, as a child, you're like, well, they don't want me, like nobody was there for me, and I had to go back to the camp a couple days later to get fabric, and the maidens were shunning me, like nobody was talking to me. So it's just that feeling of being so isolated again. But I remember my fellowship with God at that point was so good. I felt so free. I didn't care if nobody was talking to me. I felt so free to not be a maiden anymore. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember praying and talking to God and reading from Philippians about Jesus Christ coming back and the bride being prepared for him, and just really getting excited, like, yes, Lord, I am going to be ready for you. And it was that lady Jan. Victor sent her to my parents' house, and I was sharing with her how happy I was. And she said, Lindsay, have you ever thought about living for the hope and being a maiden? And I was like, no, I'm really happy where I'm at.
Yeah.
And that night, we were at fellowship outside at where my parents lived, and Victor called and had my parents bring me back. And he did a teaching that night, and all the maidens were there, and the people at the camp. My parents called, Lord, what would you have me to do? And basically said if any of the youth in the ministry wanted to stay in the ministry, they needed to ask that question, Lord, what would you have me to do? And it really was Victor, what would you have me to do? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went and asked all the maidens, do you want to stay here and be a maiden? Including me. And everyone said yes. And then he got to me, and my parents weren't helping me, nobody. And I said, okay, yes. And that was the first time I tried to leave and didn't, or did and then got sent back. Um, I tried to leave again a couple years later, and he locked me in his camper and told me I was being Judas Iscariot. And I think I went through like a whole box of tissues because he was just shaming me into, if I left, that I would be betraying him like Judas betrayed Jesus Christ. And it was also a fear. He kept teaching, um, the more you dedicate yourself in this life, the better place you're going to have in heaven. The maidens are going to have the best place in heaven because they've dedicated their lives the most in this life to serving in the church. So it was a fear of that, of being, you get to heaven and you think of heaven being obviously there to glorify God and worship him, but being around the ones, your loved ones. And so that scared me, going to heaven and being by myself,
Yeah.
not loving them. So then moving forward, yes, to my 20s. So it had come out, I think it was 2008, that Victor had been sleeping with the married women. And yeah, so, and ironically, the men had a problem with that, but yeah, they were okay with him. I mean, I guess some of them say they had no idea, but they were okay with him
Well, I
raising
mean, what were you
kids.
expecting? Like, I laugh not because it's funny. I laugh because it's like when you're so angry, you don't know what else to do. But it's like
Right.
an angry laugh where you're like,
Yes.
of course, you guys only had a problem when it was your wife, but when it
Mm-hmm.
was other people's kids or maybe even your own children, and then to
Yeah.
come out and say, well, we weren't sure if that was even what was going on is
Mm-hmm.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
yes. But anyways,
Yes.
sorry. Continue on.
No, it's okay. And he shared it. So some of the men had confronted Victor, and how it all came out was one of the women he had been sleeping with went to the police in Pine County, wrote a letter saying all these things he was doing to us as well. And it had gotten out, and so some of the men and the elders then confronted Victor. He
Mm,
shared it with the maidens. He wanted us to hear from him first, but he shared it in a way that made you feel bad for him. like David and Bathsheba, that he would, this woman was there and he was tempted. The
Mm.
temptation was too big and he succumbed, but just as David repented, God forgave him, and the same thing with Victor, and we need to be there for him, and the authorities are now involved because in Minnesota, it is a crime if you are like a pastor of a church to sleep with the people there that you're a pastor of.
Mm.
And so the authorities are now involved. Are we gonna keep the faith really and stand behind Victor? And at that point, I will tell you, I now this 8 years in, okay, of me being isolated, just all the mind games, the
Yeah.
he would do and say, and I knew that that was wrong. I did not agree with him sleeping with the married women, but I was committed to him at that point. I was like,
Mm.
yeah, I will take a bullet for you if
Were
necessary.
you in love with him?
I would say yes. Yeah, yeah. I got to that point where I um, wanted to protect him. I wanted to be with him. I thought he truly loved me. I thought that I loved him. I thought that it
Mm.
was of God, that this is what God wanted. The heaven that I envisioned, sadly, was him and the maidens. It
Mm.
had nothing really to do with praising God. When we get to heaven, it was being with Victor and the maidens. Um, So yeah, I knew what he did was wrong, but I was ready to defend him. And he kind of went on the run. Things really started breaking up a little. One of the 10 maidens, she was originally from Brazil. Her visa had expired and the U.S. was not going to renew it. So she had to go back to Brazil, and we always had to be in twos, the maidens did. So Victor would send one of us down to stay with her, and we would switch out every 6 months. So um, two of us were gone then in Brazil, and a couple people went with Victor. And so I think at one point it was only six of us, and we were trying to hold down the fort. And yeah, it was a really tough time. Victor ended up eventually sending me to Brazil, September of 2009. My parents ended up moving back to Pennsylvania. People started splitting up.
Mm.
Victor at that point had decided that we should all move to Washington State, and so people were preparing for that, ones who were going to go. So I got sent to Brazil, and that was my first time traveling alone. My first time on an airplane since 1997. And I remember I sat in my seat, and it was the TVs on
Mm-hmm.
the backs of the chairs. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, should I watch a movie? Will they find out? Like, surely they're going to find out. The pilot's going to find out. Somehow it's going to be on a bill. Like, and remember, I didn't know how anything worked. I didn't know
Yeah.
anything with finances. I didn't know how to do any of this stuff. So I didn't know that you could just watch it and it wasn't going to be like tracked. I thought it
Mm-hmm.
was literally they were tracking everything that I was doing. But I said F it, and I picked this movie to watch. And it was this British rom-com. I don't know how I chose it, but it was called Angus, Thongs, and Perfect Snogging. Have you seen it?
Yes, with Aaron Taylor Johnson.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
I
I
loved
love
it.
that. I laugh because that had to have been such a interesting movie to watch after years of
Yes.
being there. I mean, yes, yes, I have seen that movie.
Okay.
Yes.
I tell people and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, yes.
Um, I thought it was so great, and then I'm watching it and I'm like, oh, like I wish I could have had that life, and because we watched movies when I was younger, I had a taste of that, and before I became a maiden, there were some boys at the camp who I had crushes on. You remember those feelings, and um, anyway, the movie was finished, and it was probably 24 hours total of travel between all the
Wow.
airports and everything. But I was like, okay, that one is enough. God forbid, I'm already going to be in so much trouble for this. And I get to Brazil, and it was really experiencing life outside the cult for the first time. we were traveling different places and meeting people, and I think my eyes were just starting to get open, like, oh my gosh, there's a life
Mm.
outside of everything. And I really became, excuse me, I really became distant in my heart from Victor.
Mm.
And I do know, like, I had a very hard time reconciling the fact that he had slept with married women. That was really difficult for me. Even though I didn't realize what he was doing to us was rape, I did know that that was wrong, sleeping with other men's wives. Um, so he overlapped my visit. He came, him and his wife and another maiden came March of 2010. For 15 days, we were all together there, and I deliberately positioned myself in a way where he wouldn't be able to have sex with me.
Mm.
And I just was feeling I didn't want it. I was um, feeling very distant from him, you know? And so then he sent myself and his wife back. We flew to Washington State, 'cause that's where a lot of people are relocated to. And I moved in with the maidens. We had this huge house. Again, some of the stuff too, I'm like, where did all the money come from to get
I
all
was
this
gonna
stuff? You
say, I'm
know?
like, that's not a cheap
Because
thing to just
no, it
start
was
sending
seven
people to
bedrooms,
Brazil every few months and
right?
buying properties or
Oh
whatever
my
and houses in
gosh.
different places. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Crazy. I still don't know, but we lived in this huge house. It was 7 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, and the
Wow.
downstairs, yeah, it was almost like a in-law suite downstairs, you know, with a mini kitchen and other
Mm-hmm.
rooms and rooms. So that they had a whole bedroom set up there for Victor. And they had started a cleaning company. So we were going door to door, knocking on
Wow.
people's doors in Spokane, Washington, asking to clean their houses. And
Wow.
again, that was just another, you know, seeing how other people live. I remember walking into this one house and the Titanic soundtrack was playing, which I had seen when I was 10. And I was like, oh my gosh, I remember. It was like memories coming back. Like,
Yeah.
why can't I listen to this, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
um, it was June of 2010. Me and the kind of like the head of the maidens, we were sitting on the couch together. We weren't feeling well. We were watching March of the Penguins. It was one of the approved things we could watch. It's this documentary. Morgan Freeman's the voice, and I just looked at her and I said, I don't want to be a maiden anymore. I want to leave. And I think she was in complete shock. Like, what? And I was like, yep,
Mm-hmm.
I want to leave. I want to get married someday. I want to have kids. And she then called her mother, which was Jan, and they ended up calling Victor. And, you know, of course, they're saying all these things like, if you leave, you're going to forget your first love, and you must not love God anymore, and trying to guilt me into staying. And I don't know, when I think back about it, I'm like, I don't know how I stayed so strong, but I did not back down. I was like, no, I'm leaving. I do not agree with Victor sleeping with the married women. I remember telling Jan that, and she said, well, the blood of the Lamb covers all sin, and you just need to forgive Victor. And we all make mistakes. And my parents had since relocated back to Pennsylvania, so they called them and asked if I could move in with them. And of course, they said yes. And so that was it. It happened really fast. I think it was 2 or 3 days later I left. They gave me $500. They bought me a train ticket. And I took Amtrak all the way from Washington State to 30th Street Station in Philadelphia.
Mm.
Took 3 days to get there, and I just had this one chair to sit in the whole time. And I remember being so nervous. There was a man that sat next to me at one point, and I was basically panicking, you know, like to make sure not to have eye contact with him. And again, you're still thinking, are they tracking me? Do they
Yeah.
know what's happening? And I remember the conductor or somebody on the train we were going through historical things like the Badlands and, you know, different areas, and they were stopping at points to show, and I stayed in my seat because I was so nervous to do anything. Um, but yeah, that's when I left. I was just ready to be done, and I'm sure Victor being away in Brazil helped as well. Um,
Yeah. To kind
not
of
really
clear your head
listening.
there and kind of give you clarity on that.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
And so, what was it like then when you reunited with your parents and you kind of moved back in with them? Were they like far removed from the cult at that point that they were like, okay, hey, or were they like, what are you doing? Why are you back here? Like, what was the vibe?
Oh man. Um, I think they were like happy to see me. They still had pictures of Victor up in the house. We're still sending money to, I don't know who they were sending it to, but to, the ministry. Still having fellowship in the home. I would say my mother at that point was way more committed than my dad
Mm,
was. Like my dad reconnected. I will say he is gifted, so talented musically. He could play any instrument. I mean, perfect pitch, beautiful voice. So that he had a band in the 70s and reconnected with those guys and started up, playing again. My mother was constantly on the phone with people from Washington, constantly on the phone with Jan. I felt like she had started drinking again heavily and smoking. And I remember I created a Facebook at one point shortly after I got there, and my mom said that that was like very, I'm a maiden and I should not be doing those kinds of things, and shamed me so much I deleted it. I felt so bad. But then a couple weeks later, I was like, whatever, and I created another one. She was really, I started meeting people. I got a job, started meeting friends, and, went out to my first bar. And she was really, I would say it felt like hate towards me coming from
mm,
her. Um, in the beginning, some of the maidens would still call or write letters, and I would talk to them and I'd write back. And I remember Victor calling at one point and asking if I was staying in my vows and being faithful, and I said yes, but I wasn't. I don't think I like was having sex with other men at that point, but I just didn't as far as
I mean,
faithful.
at this point, your vow was literally like, I can't make eye contact with other men. So
Right.
it's like,
Yeah.
even if you were to make
Yeah.
eye contact with other men, you're essentially
Breaking
breaking your
that.
vow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, and eventually they stopped. Letters stopped. I stopped. I think I got a letter and then I just never responded. And yeah, so she was really um, like not hostile really, but her looks. When somebody it's like they're looking
Hmm.
at you with those dead, like cold eyes, the hatred. That's really what it felt like coming from her. Um, and at that point, I still didn't know that I had been raped. I I people would say because I was so naive about everything, I didn't know anything. I mean, people would be like, "What did you grow up under a rock? Like what happened?" And I just would tell people, "Oh, I lived on a farm and I was homeschooled." Like we didn't really have TV or radio. Um, and it wasn't until September or January of 2012, like January 1st or 2nd, I was at a New Year's Eve party with my cousin and all her friends, I think from high school and some from college, and they were going on and on about, memories from all those years and great memories and laughing and talking. And for some reason, it hit me in that moment that I didn't have any of that, that it was all stolen from me. And I talked to her and her friend. We went into the one room and I started sharing a little bit of what had happened. And she looked at me, my cousin, and said, "Lindsay, you were raped. Do you even know what that word means?" And she started explaining what that meant and kind of like opened my eyes up to what had been done to me. And she encouraged me to talk to her dad and stepmom, and then I went to the police. And Jess, the maiden who I was really close to, she had left already. She left in 2008. Jess did. And so I contacted her and I was like, "Hey, do you want to go to the police together?" And she was like, "Absolutely." And that started the whole journey of then,
Wow.
telling our story of what happened to us and giving all our evidence over. And we started in 2012. January. The summer of 2012, I went to tell my parents, because I wasn't living with them at the time, what had happened to me. And the first time I tried to tell my mother, she said, I don't want to hear anything. Anything you have to say, you can tell your father. And I think it was 2 weeks later, I went back and tried to talk to both of them. And my dad just said he would help in any way he could. And my one sister was yelling at me, we were in the driveway saying, you don't know what you're talking about, like you're lying. And I will interject here, like all the kids, I really try to extend grace to, because we were all children and just, grew up in this. So I'm sure she didn't know what she was saying. My mom walked away from me and went into the kitchen, and I followed her, and just like pleading with her, going into detail of him raping me and what he had done to me since I was 12, and she looked at me with just such coldness in her heart and was like, I know a lot of bad things happen. Victor is a man of God, and I'm going to follow him.
Wow.
That was it. I basically was like, okay, and I walked out, and yeah, didn't talk to her for a really, really long time.
Well, because that was one of my questions as well as you were talking was, did you ever end up having a relationship with your parents after everything was said and done?
hmm No, no. My dad tried. Um, it was really difficult for me though because um, in the beginning it was always, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what was going on. I need you to forgive me. I can't live without you. And I would think, okay, you can't live without me, but what about all those years,
Mhm.
And he and I actually went on Dr. Phil together in 2014 because the police, it took 2012 to 2014, the police really did nothing. I mean, Jess and I
Mm.
were telling our story over and over again. And
And are you
finally,
still friends with Jess?
yes, I am. Yep. Yeah, we like reconnected and we're, right back together again. And 2014 January, we got an email from Tom Lydon from Fox News, and he asked if we would want the media's help, and both of us were like, absolutely, because the statute of limitations were going to run out.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, 2014, my dad and I were on Dr. Phil, and
Wow.
he pulled up two of his police reports that my dad had spoken to police. And the first one, my dad said he didn't know anything. But in the second one, he said, I knew what was going on, but I was too afraid to get kicked out of the church. So I didn't say anything.
Oh,
And
wow.
oh, Dr. Phil,
Ripped
he and
him
I
a new
were,
one, I'm assuming.
oh my gosh. Basically, he was like, okay, so you sold your daughter for currency so you could stay in the church.
And that was your first time hearing about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I feel like I don't even need to ask, but how does that feel then, especially when it's like your dad's trying to reconcile a relationship based off of a lie, essentially?
Yeah. At that point, I cut ties with him.
Mm.
It was just, I was still trying to deal with my own trauma,
Yeah.
and I had just had a baby. So I probably going through postpartum. I mean, I didn't know what that was at that time. I don't even know if people really talked about it back in 2014. Maybe they did, and I was just oblivious. But I mean, really on my own in ways. I had wonderful people that God placed in my life helping me through all those years since I left the cult. I mean, just real amazing people. But, as far as the trauma on the inside, really just trying to deal with it all. And I had to cut ties with my father. And he, for some reason, would not respect any boundary that I put in place. And
Mm.
his family threw a baby shower for me and was very pro him and put a number of things at his house. So I would need to go there and get it. And I was like, okay, then I'm not taking it, And one of them
That's
was
it, I
like,
guess, yeah.
and bed sheets and, other things. And Frankie just slept in a in a pack and play, which was just fine, you know.
Yep. Yep. That's what you have to do
Um,
sometimes. Yep.
yeah, yeah. Um,
And so I feel like this is the million-dollar question then is how do you have a relationship with God after that? Like what does that look like for you? Like how did you like obviously it seems like you were strong with God throughout the whole experience, which is an amazing thing to begin with
yeah.
because a lot of people would have been like absolutely not.
Mhm.
But how do you go from knowing a definition of God to saying, "Oh, I have to basically redefine who he is in my life and what he actually wants for me."
Mhm. Yeah. I, well, people are probably assuming this, but I rejected him for a very long time after
I'm
I left
sure.
because I kept thinking, okay, God, if you're a God of love, why would you leave me there? You know,
Mm,
why would you let this happen? Like, I prayed to you so many times to leave. Why would you let me be raped all that time? Um, and yeah, it was, oh gosh, 13 years it took me to even really want to um, give my life back to him, you know, like have him back in my life. And I read through journals, so I have journals from like 2012, 2014, and I still talk to him in there sometimes, but it's different. I'll say I prayed to you today, but I don't even know if you're listening to me anymore. You know, like,
mm,
and I really was, you know, there was a period of time where I was sleeping around a lot because I felt like it was the only way I knew how to make men happy, and definitely living
yeah.
a life full of sin that is not what God wants us to be, you know, wants us to live our lives. It was actually Frankie. She started asking questions at 5, 6 years old about God and noticing that some of her friends pray and ask why we don't pray. And I remember we were driving down a highway. We lived in Jersey at the time. And she was like, Mommy, if a mom has a baby and that baby dies and the mommy gets pregnant again, is that God sending a new baby down to her? Oh my gosh. And you think like 5, 6 years old, you know,
Yeah.
it's just, she has always been mature way beyond her years. But I had enough sense to know that I did not want to put my trauma on her. And I was like,
Mm,
okay, if she wants to go to church, I will support that. You know, I just felt stuck though. I didn't know where. Like, we had tried the Catholic Church, and that was, you know, my parents had both grown up Catholic, and I felt kind of a connection because my pop had sung in the choir, and um, it was always special when we were little and we get to go see him sing. But it's still, it was like every time I would hear the priest read from scripture, all I could hear was Victor's voice
mm.
reading that. And so, you know, we stopped going, but we moved to Texas with the Bible Belt. You know, there's like Christians
You're
galore.
bound to find a church there. You are bound to find one
Yeah.
there, yes.
So it was actually our neighbors in our apartment complex. Frankie started playing with their kids, and you know when you meet people and they just have this light about them, and you're like, yeah, I want to be friends with them. You
Mhm.
know, good, solid friends for my kid. Um, they were Christians. They did not like push on me at all to go to church. Did not even invite me. Like, which I really appreciated because I had had that a lot. You know, people
Yeah.
like guilting me into it. And I eventually became close with the mom, and I shared my story with her one night. And it was a couple months after that we're sitting there after dinner, and I look at her and I said, you know, this is going to come out really strange, but thank you for never inviting me to Bible study. And she started crying, and she's like, Lindsay, when you told me your story, I went home and wept tears for you because the God I know is not the God
Mm,
that was portrayed to you in Minnesota by Victor. And I think, you know, I had tried all the things, the self-help, the stones, the, you know, even like witchcraft in a way. I mean, I've
mm,
had this book on um or the like the stars and putting crystals out,
mhm.
and, you know, like the moon and connecting to the earth, and Um, Not that going out in nature can't be grounding and healing, but it was just finding your faith and everything in that, you know? And I always felt unsatisfied. And I think I was just at, that point in my life where I really was ready for some, um, to, hear scripture again. And they asked if I wanted to stay for devotions that night. And I was like, okay. And they end up singing a hymn that I had grown up singing. They didn't know. And I sang it with my whole heart. And we started talking. Her husband used to be a pastor. And I started just asking a ton of questions. And I said, you know what? I would really love for somebody to sit down with the Bible. And I want to go through certain things that Victor taught me. And I want to go into the Word and see
Mm.
what God actually says. And they said, we'd love to do that with you. And I went home that night and I got my Bible out that it was the one that Victor had given me still. And I sat on the couch and opened it up for the first time in 13 years. And it was just this overwhelming sense of coming home to an old friend. I don't know, I feel like when I've said that sometimes people are like, well, how could it feel that way immediately? It really was because I had known him
Yeah.
and he had known me since before the foundation of the world, like
Yeah.
he was there. And I felt this overwhelming sense of peace, this, almost this like comfort, like, okay, God, I'm here. I'm ready to, give my life to you again, to pray to you, to talk to you. And I just remember sitting there thinking, I cannot believe that after all these years, you would want me back,
Mm.
And it just reminded me, I still think of it that, leaves the 99 to find the one. And I think about that every time I think about my story because I really was, for 13 years, just aimlessly going about praying to him sometimes, trying to find faith and help in other ways, and just to really know and believe that he was there all along. He was holding me. He was
Mm.
listening to me, even when I truly doubted him and didn't want him there. It's just,
No,
it's
it's absolutely beautiful because that, everybody has a different testimony and story, but almost all of them wrap up with that key point is that I somehow knew that God was waiting there for me the whole time and he was there. And it's like, and it kind of makes people realize like it was never God I was running away from. It was this circumstance. It was this person. It was this thing I was doing to myself, this thing that somebody was doing to me. And it reminds me of the song. I don't know if you've heard it. It's Take You Back by Jeremy Camp,
mm,
and it's all about what you are describing, which is in the chorus he is kind of singing as what God would say to us, where God says, I'll take you back always, even in your pain, it's over now, is
mhm.
what Jeremy Camp kind of sings about. And that's what it reminds me of. And so to close, what would you say to a young woman who obviously, nobody's going to share your circumstance? Like that is a, beyond measurable circumstance for a lot of young ladies, a crazy, sad, awful, yet ending in a beautiful way circumstance. But what would you say to a young woman who might be in the middle of this feeling where, God, why are you letting this happen to me? Like, why are you not here with me? What would you say to her?
Oh, I think what I've had to learn is I kept putting my faith in people, I kept
Mm.
looking at my circumstances and thinking, even now, there's been things that have happened in the past couple of months where I'm like, why did this person hurt me again? Like I thought they weren't going to hurt me. They said they weren't going to hurt me. And I had put so much faith in a person. And we are all
Mm.
sinners. We live in a cursed world. None of us are perfect. And so I think really not putting my faith in a person and truly trusting in the Lord, like, okay, I don't know why this is happening. But I know that you've been with me through every valley, that you know what's going to happen in my future. You know, I look back on things and I'm like, oh, this is why that
Mm-hmm.
happened because of this, you know? I think learning not to put my faith in people, and not that we can't have trust in people, you know, and have shared bonds and be able to share openly with someone. But really, as far as I think having, you know, what people would say church hurt or people hurting them, I think I was always putting my trust in Victor, putting my trust in my parents, and, you know, in these people who ultimately all let me down. And so learning to not do that anymore and have my faith in Christ, knowing that He is the one who is going to guide me through it, has really helped um, with that.
So, I mean, thank you for, sharing your story and being vulnerable. I feel like that is so important. Secondly, again, I have to say that I'm sorry for everything that happened. I feel like that's
Mm.
like something I just have to say. I mean, it's absolutely awful. And thirdly, where can people follow you and keep up with what you're doing and your updates and all of that? So where can people keep an eye on what you're doing?
Instagram probably is the best, and it's Lindsay underscore Tornambe is my Instagram handle. I should probably create a website. People have brought that up, like to just have even everything linked there, you know, to make it easy for everyone. But yeah, Instagram, I'll be updating, and I'm always more than willing to even talk with you again if you even want to talk anything motherhood or
Yeah, no, that would be
politics,
amazing.
all the good stuff. But
Yes, that would be amazing.
yeah, yeah. So and hopefully I'll be working on a book soon. But yeah, I'm always down for a good chat. Either, you know, and even in person, like I would love to do more speaking engagements if anyone who's listening is interested.
And that was Let's Talk episode 34. And again, I just wanted to say thank you for coming on and sharing your story. And yes, I would love to have you on again. And thank you for listening.